Welcome to the Retire with Peace podcast, the podcast where we help you create a fulfilling and stress-free retirement. Each week, we bring you expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you plan and live your best retirement life. Whether you're nearing retirement or already enjoying your golden years, this podcast is here to support you every step of the way. Let's embark on this journey together and discover how to retire with peace.
Welcome back to the Retire with Peace podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dave Zaegel, and we're continuing our little mini-series here on reviewing some articles written by others, because I enjoy reading other perspectives, and education's always good. So we will link the article into our show notes, but then go over some of the points that they're communicating, and I'll give you my thoughts along the way. So this one is an article that's on NerdWallet. The title is 5 Steps to Retirement Planning in 2025, written by Tina Oram and June Sham. Hopefully I pronounced those last names correctly. But Tina and June did a good job writing this article. I like it. Let's go through their 5 steps. First is know when to start retirement planning. And really they say, hey, this is up to you. The earlier you start, the better off you are. But it's also never too late to start. Which is good. That's all great. The one thing that I will caution people against is trying to get too much certainty too early and also not waiting too long. Yes, it's never too late to start. That's true. I would say, please don't wait until the day before you're trying to retire. Try to give yourself, in my opinion, at least maybe 5 years before you're going to retire to start, kind of at a minimum. Don't wait too much longer than that, because there's a lot that you can be doing planning wise in those couple years leading up to retirement that's going to be really helpful for you. So I say, if you can, try to give yourself at least 5 years before you want to retire to you start getting deep into planning. In terms of doing it early, my only caution, as I mentioned already, is not to be focused too much on absolute certainty while you were younger. I've just seen this happen quite a bit where, let's say that you have somebody in their 30s or even early 40s, and they want to do a retirement projection to get to some level of certainty on whether or not they can retire at this age. Let's say, for example, there's a 37-year-old and they want to retire at 60. So they want to get a retirement plan that shows, can they retire at age 60? And there's going to be a whole bunch of variables in there. And the challenge is, and I've seen this a lot, where there's online tools, there's also other advisors that will take the inputs, come up with a report that will show something like, oh, you have an 82.5% chance in the Monte Carlo simulation of being able to retire at age 60. And I think, give me a break. This person's 37 years old. They have 23 more years until they hit age 60. It's great to be running all these scenarios, but there's going to be so much life that happens in between now and 23 years from now that all these inputs are great. But really, instead of trying to get to that level of certainty, it's important to understand, really, are you on the right path? Are you moving in the right direction? Are you generally going to be okay around that time that you want to retire? I love goal setting. I love being specific and having a plan of action. I think that's great. I just don't want people that are young and doing some retirement planning to be focused so much on this certainty of, will I achieve this goal? Because so much is going to happen in your life. And that certainty goal that you're looking for involves a whole bunch of assumptions and variables that we don't know how they're going to play out. We don't know what rates of return are going to be the next couple decades. We don't know what inflation is going to be. We don't know what taxes are going to be. It's just way too long term to be sitting here with absolute certainty when you're in your 30s or 20s or even early 40s and saying, yes, when I get to 60, whatever, am I going to absolutely be able to retire with this exact dollar amount? Just, I'm just saying, don't get hung up. I'm kind of going on too long on that one, but I'm just saying, don't get super, super hung up on this certainty. Just know that you're doing the right things that we'll talk about a little bit more in this article. Just make sure that you're doing the right things. You're putting money away and you're generally going in the right direction and on a good path. So, anyway, that was point number one. I belabored that one a bit too much. I apologize. Second point is figure out how much money you need to retire. And they note in this article that the typical advice is to replace 70 to 90% of your annual pre retirement income. I think that's fine. I try to keep it even simpler because I've seen a lot of people say, well, my gross income right now working is this, then I have these deductions off my paycheck, and I won't have the 401k contribution anymore. And how do we factor that in? I keep it simpler. I say, how much money is coming into your bank account right now every month from working? That is what we want to match in retirement because that's what you're used to. There's no sense in trying to do some grand calculation. If you're used to getting 9,000 a month into your bank account from your paycheck, well, then let's plan for 9,000 a month from your combination of investments and Social Security and pension if you have one, all the above. Let's plan for that dollar amount to be hitting your bank account when you retire. Unless there's some other situation in which you think it should be higher or lower, that's always important for planning. But otherwise, take what you're making now, what hits your bank account on a monthly basis right now, and just plan for that in retirement. I know it might sound overly simplistic to a lot of people, but if you think about the psychology of it, that's what you're used to having happen for the past several decades. Just continue on with that. Have a monthly amount come out of your investments and Social Security and other sources into your bank account every month, just the same. You can adjust it after that. If it's a little bit too much and you don't need that, then you can back off. But to help with the transition from working and into retirement, just keep that same monthly amount of income coming in. It's going to help with you psychologically making that transition and making sure that you have enough money because that's what you're living off of currently. Point number three is prioritize your financial goals. So this is talking a little bit more about, um, I wouldn't say about younger, but kind of about younger, where you're not only focused on retirement, you have to be focused on having an emergency fund or having other goals of paying off debt, or maybe you need to buy a different house, or maybe you have another kid, or whatever that is. There's going to be a lot of other things that happen in life. Retirement is not the only thing that you have to deal with. That being said, retirement is something you can't necessarily pay for later very easily. So it's important to be putting money away for retirement. I think the point that they're making here, which is a good point, is don't simply focus on retirement and abandon everything else that you need to be doing. We've seen this enough times where people are shoving a ton of money into retirement, which is good, but they're also then loaded with a whole bunch of debt. Maybe they have a whole lot of car loans, a whole bunch of student loans, and they're really stressed month to month trying to figure this all out. And in the meantime, they're putting 20% of their paycheck into retirement. That's a moment where you have to say, hold on, hold on. Yes, retirement's important, but you need some sanity right now. Let's talk about paying off some of this debt. Maybe if you're putting 20% of your paycheck towards retirement, can we back it off to 15? And that's just an example, but can we back it off to 15 and get some other stuff paid off or build up the emergency fund? So yes, good point that it's important to prioritize your goals. Don't only focus on retirement. There's a lot else to do, especially while you're younger, planning for retirement. Their fourth point is choose the best retirement plan for you. Um, Most businesses you'll work with have some availability to a 401k or other employer retirement plan. But if you don't have that, you can open up your own retirement account. So you can open up a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. Those all depend on income. So you might have to do a backdoor Roth IRA or a non-deductible contribution to an IRA. That's getting into a whole bunch of specific tax laws around IRAs. But just understand that there's no one best way to do it. I would say, as they point out very correctly in this article, The best place to start is always if you're going to get an employer match. So if you have an employer plan and you put in money and the employer matches that, always do that. Always. That is always the first step, because that's just free money from the employer to you, as long as you are still making a contribution yourself to that retirement plan. So a lot of times it might be what's called a safe harbor plan, where you put in 4% and the company matches 4%, or you put in 5% and the company's matching 3 or 4. I can't remember exactly the percentage there, but there's certain rules around the different types of plan and how much match the company makes. But that's, again, free money from the company that if you don't make your contribution, you don't get from the company most of the time. There's different types of plans that will still contribute even if you don't. We don't see that too often. Usually you have to put some money in and the employer will match that, at least a portion of that. There's really no reason to put money elsewhere. I guess there could be if it's a really crappy plan or some other reason, but most all the time, the best place to start is in a retirement plan if your employer is matching that. After that, you have many different options between putting in the employer plan, putting in an IRA, putting it in a non-IRA account. There's all sorts of different options. Just understand that you're not locked into one and only one thing that you must do. Just make sure that if the employer is giving you a match, get that first, because that's free money to you. Then the fifth is selecting your retirement investments. So I like what they point out in here, which is generally when you're younger, you want to be more aggressive. For those that listen to the podcast, I'm going to repeat myself again, in that when we're looking at retirement planning, we like to have at least 5 years worth of income planned out, and then the rest can be put more aggressively into stocks for the long term. Now, why do we do that? Because the history of the stock market has shown that these stocks, when you back up and give enough of a long-term lens, are a phenomenal place to be putting your money away and watching it grow over the long term. So even when Great Depression happened, Great Recession, even in the 70s when we had terrible inflation, if we gave these investments enough time, they were able to compound growth extremely well over the long term. So to this point, while you are younger, it pays to be more aggressive. Nothing insane, but you want to be a little bit more aggressive and go for the long-term growth, because you can handle all the ups and downs. If it's in a retirement account, you can't touch it anyway until you're 59 and a half, with some exceptions. You cannot touch it until you're 59 and a half. So it's going to be in there a long time. It can have all the ups and downs at once, as long as long-term that money's going to grow. So when you're younger, yes, generally be a little bit more aggressive. Go for that growth, because you can't be taking the money out anyway. Let it have all its ups and downs. We're just focused on the end point. Then as you get older, you can back off that aggressiveness. And that's where we get into, as we're starting to get closer to retirement, we want to make sure that we have set up to where we have that 5 years worth of income for the first 5 years of retirement in a lot of investments that aren't as volatile. Think stocks, bonds, CDs, cash, structured notes, all those pieces where they're not necessarily tied to the stock market. So that way we have a little bit more, I'm not allowed to use the word safety too much, but where there's a little bit more certainty of us being able to take the money out and not have fluctuations in value that would be tied to the stock market. So have that for at least 5 years. As you get closer to retirement, then the rest can grow much more aggressively. So overall, good article, good 5 points. So well done to Tina and June over at NerdWallet. And the link to this article is in the show notes for this podcast episode. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully you learned something, and definitely take a look at this article. I think it's a good one. It's a quick read, 3-minute read. So dive right in and enjoy. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. I really appreciate your support and hope you found value in the conversation. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Your feedback helps keep the show growing. Until next time, take care and stay strong as we learn